Revolutionary War. Joining me is Bilal Mehmed, author of Causes of the Revolutionary War. Thanks for being here, Bilal.
Thanks for having me, Derek.
The first event I want to talk about is the French and Indian War. When did it occur and where?
It occurred from 1754 to 1763. It took place in the Ohio Valley, Derek.
It looks like you have something here, Bilal.
Yes, Derek. I have a sword from the French.
I wouldn't want to stab one of those things.
Okay, here it goes. Just kidding.
Good one. But back to the French and Indian War. What was the French and Indian War all about?
Good question. It was a war between the Native Americans and the French against the colonists and British. It was fought for control of the land.
How did it end?
The British and the colonists won.
Yay! Another cause in your book is the Sugar Act. When did the Sugar Act occur?
It occurred 1764.
Where did it take place?
It took place all over the colonies.
What was the Sugar Act?
It put a 3-cent tax on sugar and increased tax on coffee, indigo, and certain kinds of wine. It also banned importing French wine and rum.
Who was involved in it?
Parliament passed it, but the colonies were against it.
Why was it passed?
To improve the revenue of the kingdom.
How did it end?
It was replaced with the Revenue Act of 1766. But before we go further, I want to show you something. It's an original sign that says no taxation without representation.
If it's real, why does it have a barcode on the back?
Okay, so maybe it's from the Smithsonian, but it's still an exact replica.
The third event is the Currency Act. What was the Currency Act?
It prohibited the colonial government from issuing its own paper money.
When and where did it take place?
It took place all over the colonies and was passed 1764 and was repealed 1773.
Who was involved?
Like always, Parliament passed it, but the colonies were against it. 1 second. What's in your pocket?
It's a colonial dollar you're going to show us.
You stole my 200-year-old dollar?
No, I borrowed it. Anyway, why did they pass the Currency Act?
They repealed the act because they realized they didn't need it except when the colonists paid their private debt.
Now we will learn about the Stamp Act. Bilal, what was the Stamp Act?
The Stamp Act said you had to put a stamp on almost every document.
Where and when did the Stamp Act take place?
It took place in all the colonies and was passed 1765.
Who was involved?
Parliament passed it, but the colonies were against it.
Why was this act passed?
To help pay for troops and after America's victory in the 7 Years' War.
How did it end?
In 1766, it was repealed because the Sons of Liberty and the Daughters of Liberty stopped trading with Britain. Before I change the subject, I want to show you something. My stamp collection. I have a stamp.
What's that stamp?
I have a stamp that was from the colonial times.
What's that stamp next to the colonial one?
Oh, just a man with a beard.
Our next act is the Declaratory Act. When did this act pass?
March 18th, 1766.
Who was involved?
Parliament, the colonies, and George Grenville. I even have a picture of George Grenville.
Cool. Wow, Anyway, what was the Declaratory Act?
The Declaratory Act stated that Parliament's authority was the same as in the colonies as in Britain to make abiding laws in the America.
Where did it take place?
British American colonies and the British West Indies.
Why did it happen?
People were suffering from non-importing.
Our next act is the Declaratory Act. Bilal, when did this act pass?
March 18, 1766.
Who was involved?
Parliament and the the Parliament of the colonists joined Greenville. I even have a picture of George Greenville.
He has a mustache? Cool. Anyway, what was the Declaratory Act?
The Declaratory Act stated that Parliament's authority was the same in the colonies and in Britain to make the binding laws in America.
Where did it take place?
British American colonies and the British West Indies.
Why did it happen?
People were suffering from non-importing.
How did it end?
It ended up being the #1 cause to the American Revolution.
Now, next act is the Townshend Act. What was the Townshend Act?
It was an act that taxed tea, paper, and paint in the colonies.
When was it passed?
In 1767.
Why was it passed?
It was passed for a number of reasons. To pay judges, governors, to enforce compliance with trade regulations, and to tell the other colonies they had the right to tax them.
Who was involved in the Townshend Act?
Charles Townshend had the idea, Parliament passed, and the colonies rebelled against it. I even have a picture of Charles Townshend.
They look, Mr. Townshend and he look a Mr. Townshend and Mr. Greenfield look alike. But back to business. Where did the act take place?
All over the colonies.
How did it end?
Well, the colonists finally got their way, and Parliament repealed everything except for the tax on tea.
Another important event that led up to the Revolution is the Boston Massacre. What was the Boston Massacre?
A group of colonists were pelting ice and rocks at guards who were protecting the custom house. Finally, the soldiers had enough and started firing into the crowd. 11 people were shot and 5 soldiers were arrested for murder.
When did this happen?
March 5th, 1770.
Where exactly did it take place?
On King Street, now known as State Street in Boston.
Why were the colonists so angry?
They did not want soldiers all around their town. Before we end this subject, I want to show you a famous painting of the Boston Massacre.
Why is there ketchup on the bodies?
It's blood.
Oh. We are now on our 8th event that led to the American Revolution. What was the Tea Act?
The British shipped tea to the colonies for a low price, but it was still taxed.
Why did the British pass this act?
It was passed because the British East India Company wasn't doing well financially, and the British wanted to give it more business in the colonies.
When was the Tea Act passed?
It was passed May 10th, 1773, and it ended 1778.
Where did it take place?
It took place all over the colony.
Who was involved?
The Parliament passed it, but the colonists rebelled against it. I even have a letter by John Hancock protesting the Tea Act.
His signature is a lot bigger on the Declaration of Independence. I have one more question. How did it end?
The colonists were so angry about the Tea Act that they organized the Boston Tea Party, which we'll talk about next.
The Boston Tea Party was one of the major events that led to the Revolution. When did the Tea Party take place?
December 16th, 1773.
I know it took place in Boston, but where in Boston?
On the Boston Harbor.
What happened at the Boston Tea Party?
Well, a bunch of colonists dressed like Native Americans snuck on the boat and dumped 900 chests of tea into the Boston Harbor.
Why would they do something like that?
They were outraged by the Tea Act, which we talked about before. I actually have a headdress that the colonists wore during the Boston Tea Party. I wonder where I put it.
It's on the table. That's very interesting, but how did it all end?
The Boston harbor was closed, the colonists paid for the tea, and Boston was appointed a new governor.
Our final segment is the Quartering Act. When did this act occur?
June 2nd, 1774.
What was the Quartering Act?
The act made the colonists provide housing for the soldiers. I even have some of the clothes that the colonists provided the soldiers.
Ew, soldiers have stinky socks. Anyway, where did it take place?
In Massachusetts.
Who was involved?
Parliament and the Massachusetts colonists.
How did it end?
It was repealed March 24th, 1776.
This is the end of NFP. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Pleasure for being here. Thanks.
Great having you.